Hi, folks. This is Gary Walker. Welcome to WBGO.org and another conversation that I think you're going to enjoy. Ted Rosenthal is one of the leading jazz pianists and composers of his generation and of this music today, touring with Jerry Mulligan and our farmer Phil Woods, Bob Brookmeyer, and James Moody. Also a leader in his own right, a composer in his own right, and just out this year a trio in four acts. And we're delighted to be chatting with Ted Rosenthal today on WBGO. Ted, it's nice to see you. And by the way, for the holidays, one of the hippest holiday records ever is a record that Ted did called Wonderland that is a must. If you can find this one for your holiday listening, you will not be disappointed. Ted, nice to see you, man.
It's great to see you, Gary. It's been a little too long,
It
and
has been too
totally
long, but it's
gonna.
nice to be here today. A trio in four acts, although you've performed and recorded with symphony orchestras. You've also done compositions for dance companies around the country, including the legendary Alvin Ailey Dance Company. You've even done an opera that we're going to reference because it's part of this trio book, and so much more. And performed with symphony orchestras in Rochester and Dallas and Detroit and Phoenix and so many other cities across the country. But he keeps coming back to the threesome. What is it about the trio that inspires you in your creative endeavors?
It's really the perfect combination. As a pianist, my heroes all played piano trio, and it has everything you need. It's got the drums that provide all the rhythmic swing and backgrounds, and the bass for the foundation. And it allows me as the pianist to do so many things in so many directions at the piano, orchestrationally, compositionally, how I arrange pieces for the trio. So that's all we need are three.
Yeah, it's kind of scary in one respect because we're just three people there. It can be kind of frightening, kind of like giving a speech with no clothes on. But if you come prepared, as this man has throughout his career, then not to worry, my friends, not to worry. Uh, Studied classical piano and jazz, but I want to talk about one person in particular because Fred Hirsch also mentioned this guy to me. Talk about Jackie Byard. What was it about Jackie Byard that was an inspiration to you?
It's funny. I connected with Jackie at age 16. There was a once in a lifetime summer jazz program at Bennington College. It was actually not part of Bennington College, but held there. And for 6 weeks, it was like a who's who of New York City jazz in 1976. And some floated in for a week or two, but Jackie was up there for all 6 weeks. And after my experience of mentoring with him there, I continued studying with him at his home in Queens. And it's funny when you're 16, especially back then, without the internet and exposure to the kind of information that 16-year-olds may be exposed to today. Uh, it wasn't as fully clear to me, but looking back and experiencing his just love of the entire history of jazz piano and not seeing it like, well, I can only play stride, or I can only play free, or I can only play bebop, Bud Powell. So that was in his spirit, and that was in his approach that I don't think he said quite as directly, but came through in when he talked about music and played for me.
And Ted takes that to heart, folks. Keep in mind, Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag. Wait till you hear Ted Rosenthal's Schmata Rag. That's going to be coming up on one of his future recordings. We're chatting with Ted Rosenthal today, and I want to talk about high standards. This is the first of the four recordings in a trio and four acts, and it features you in two different trio settings with Martin Wind on the bass and Tim Horner on the drums and then Noriko Ueda on bass and Quincy Davis on the drums. And the reimagination of standards that we thought we knew, tunes from Broadway, like Jet Song from West Side Story, or To Life from Fiddler on the Roof, and so much more. but I want to talk about like Old Devil Moon, for example. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, you've heard that song how many times, but I guarantee you, you haven't heard it as performed by the Ted Rosenthal Trio. And I know how you are about approaching standards. You always look for reimagination and little nuggets to throw in there and maybe surprise and maybe engage as well. So, in when listening to Old Devil Moon, it kind of has a Latin feel, and then it goes straight ahead. But all of a sudden, you get a little taste of Norwegian Wood, and you get a little taste of Bye Bye Blackbird, and it's all inside that one tune. How is it for the other two people in the trio to accommodate those kind of things? Because those weren't rehearsed, were they? I mean, you just kind of threw those out there, right?
Well, the arrangement itself was definitely rehearsed. It's quite tricky. And I would mention that the arrangement came out of some inspiration. Education is also a part of my life, and I teach at the Juilliard School and Manhattan School of Music, and I'm fortunate to work with, really the top piano talent. When you get a record that comes in from a young pianist, there's a good chance that I've worked with them at some point. Anyway, at Manhattan School of Music, the great drummer who I also play with from time to time named John Riley teaches a course in rhythm, and I decided to sit in and watch the course for a while. And, we're lifelong learners, we're students of the music. And so he threw out some rhythmic concepts that intrigued me and are a part of this Old Devil Moon arrangement. So there are a lot of tricky rhythmic and metric things that happen, but what you picked up on was a section where we are kind of just playing the tune, trading fours, and it kind of just it didn't happen immediately, but it came almost like a tradition in the trio to see how many little things we could quote using that little
And it
progression.
worked. It
Yeah.
worked beautifully, man.
Well, thank you. It's kind of fun because after a lot of tricky stuff, it's kind of fun to just have some quotes that make people smile.
And they do indeed.
It's a
I
real
was I was
journey.
smiling
That
indeed.
arrangement is a real
And
journey.
then there's a sense of humor also in your playing, and not just as you play, but also in programming the compositions. Back to back are the tunes. Everything happens to me, and it could happen to you.
You noticed. Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I think there's a long history of jazz and comedy, and we sit, between the sound check and the concert, we're often sitting around telling stories and telling jokes, and there is an element certainly of surprise in what we do and humor, and so and sometimes I call what we're doing serious fun because we are dead serious in our study of it and our appreciation of it and our respect of jazz history and everything that goes with it. But we also want to have fun and the improvisational spirit to feel that you can try something new in the moment and have fun with it.
and have fun for the listenership too, as they enjoy it as well. We're chatting with Ted Rosenthal, and whether it's one from 42nd Street or Old Devil Moon or Jet Song from West Side Story, which is another fantastic arrangement of that tune done by Ted for this first of four recordings called High Standards, but also the serious fun that he referenced to. I turn your attention to their read, excuse me, of Loverman, where there's just some gorgeous arco playing by Martin Wind in that.
Yes. Yeah, Martin is a consummate bass player. He had a lot of traditional classical training in Germany, and his arco playing is second to none, and he combines it very well with his jazz approaches and sensibilities, and it's just another beautiful color that he adds to the trio.
This is the first of the four recordings. The second is the Ted Rosenthal Songbook, which inside of that, it contains four pieces of music from your opera. Talk about that if you would.
Yes, well, as I think we've discussed years ago, I was very fortunate to be given the opportunity to be commissioned and have a premiere by New York City Opera of a jazz opera that I conceived based on really my family's history and rediscovery of some letters that were written to my father when he escaped Nazi Germany by mostly his mother and other relatives, and the revelations and intense emotional experiences of learning about family history I didn't know was inspired me to uh, conceive a jazz opera that came to fruition in 2019 with New York City Opera. Musically speaking, one of my influences, as is one of my influences in many ways, was George Gershwin and George Gershwin's Porgy and Bess, because in a very conceptual way, not in any way trying to copy anything, I thought, well, Gershwin wrote this almost 3 hour serious, through composed opera, but within that are about a dozen songs that we as jazz players and of course jazz vocalists love to play or play and sing. So part of my musical approach was to have songs that I in fact go on and play with my trio, and four of them are on the Ted Rosenthal songbook.
Fabulous. And of course, Letters from Eric, Dear Eric is the title of the jazz opera. You performed that all over the world.
Well, after the premiere, we've done more than a dozen concert versions of it. I'm still hoping for more fully produced productions with staging and costumes and all of that, but we've done concert versions all over the world, you're right, in Europe, around the country, with usually 6 to 8 singers and my trio as the format for it.
Being a classically trained musician, you have never wandered far. In fact, I think it is one of your pure joys to take the music from the classical arena. You've done it. You did it on the three Bs, where we had Bud Powell and Bill Evans and Beethoven all coming together on one recording. But you also do it on the third installment of the four part trio encounter called Classics Reimagined Impromptu. Talk about how that came together.
Well, Impromptu, without the number two, was released about 14 years ago, and that was a collection of themes by Chopin, Brahms, Schumann, etc., that I reimagined, again, to use that word, into our world of jazz with the jazz trio, and figure out ways to uh, make the rhythm, the harmony, the melodies come into a jazz song. And one of the best reviews I enjoyed from the first one was where a reviewer said, I stepped away from my CD player and I thought, whoa, what standard am I hearing? And I came back and it was a Chopin Nocturne. So I love that.
I never heard that Cole Porter tune before.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so that's a big part of it. And it's that doesn't always have to be that way, but it should sound organic and not forced, and that's my goal. And over the years, I have another collection of them, and we finally went into the studio and put them down. This time I decided a few of the songs would be nice with some additions to the trio. So on two or three, I think three actually, songs, the wonderful violinist Sarah Caswell, who's now playing all around with everybody,
Yeah.
joins us. And she also, we first met her as a student at MSM. So, the circle kind of, continues. And then, of course, my old friend and colleague Ken Poplawski, fantastic clarinetist, he joins us on a couple as well.
And this is Classics Reimagined Impromptu. And talk about the fourth episode, which we haven't seen yet, but it's coming. And I believe is that the one that we're going to hear the Schmata Rag?
Yes. Well, Gary, it's interesting because you brought up Jackie Byard and this idea of the history of jazz piano and feeling the freedom of playing ragtime or stride, but then things that are associated with eras, well beyond that. And so the fourth one is called The Good Old Days, which again, a little bit of a humorous intent, is hearkening back to earlier styles. So ragtime, stride, swing, maybe a little early bebop in there. I can't help myself, basically. Uh, and on two of the pieces, inspired by James P. Johnson, who plays some of his stride and ragtime with drums, just piano and drums, because with that stride left hand, you don't really necessarily need a bass. So on two of the pieces, I played duets with Tim Horner, and one of them is the Maple Leaf Rag, and one is a piece I wrote for an event that Dick Hyman was involved in organizing that was called a Hanukkah Cabaret. And I decided that I would take little snippets of melodies that I heard over the years when I went to Temple and craft them into a piece that was going to be a rag. And my wife, Leslie, who's quite brilliant, came up with the great title, Shmata Rag. And so there you have it.
You mentioned earlier in our conversations today that you have now relocated to the Upper West Side. You know, it was the West Side where Lincoln Center now stands. That was once San Juan Hill, and
Yes.
that's where people like James P. Johnson and Thelonious Monk and many others. Benny Carter was raised in that area. All came up in that multicultural environment. Think about that section of town, which is now Lincoln Center, but think about it as New York's New Orleans, because
Mm,
it was the melding of all these different cultures, Black and Afro-Caribbean and
right.
Puerto Rican, that all came together and influenced that music. And it was in the basement of one of those clubs in that neighborhood called the Jungle Club, where James P. Johnson created the Charleston.
I didn't know that. Well, every time we speak, Gary, you teach me something, so that's cool.
You know, there's not a day that goes by that I don't learn something about this music.
Yeah.
And whether it's reading something or listening to something like High Standards, for example, and hearing all these references and how much fun and the time changes and the chordal displays that happen on some of the tunes, a la I think like Errol Garner, for example. You know, those chording of the melodies, and it's all here on this recording. The magnificent Ted Rosenthal High Standards, the first of four recordings that we will enjoy at WBGO, and you can bet we're going to pass those along. What's in store for you coming up next, performance wise?
Well, just next week, I'm playing up at Tanglewood, and they've started, in addition to their summer season that features the Boston Symphony, where I did last summer get to play a wonderful concert called Trumpet Summit with John Faddis, Randy Brecker, Benny Benack, and Bria Schoenberg, along with my
Ooh.
trio. And we sold out Ozawa Hall, which was great. And we're planning another one for next summer at Ozawa Hall, another concert that is. We're still refining the content of it. But there's a lovely smaller hall up on the Tanglewood campus associated with something called the Tanglewood Learning Institute. And it's the Lindy Center, and it seats about 300, which is a wonderful size for jazz. You know, it's intimate. There's not a bad seat in the house. And we are doing the program of Classics Reimagined impromptu. And Sarah Caswell will be joining me. And Ken Poplawski is spending the week at Birdland, so he couldn't come. But I managed to get a Not Cohen, so not too shabby, right? So Not Cohen will be with us. We're thrilled to have her. And then the trio of on that one, which was Quincy Davis on the drums and Noriko Ueda. So that's coming up the day after Thanksgiving. Then I've got a tour out in the Phoenix area. As you may know, Lewis Nash is based out there, and I'm excited to reconnect and play with Lewis at the Nash and a couple of other venues in that area. And the bassist, again, is another former student. I say that a lot these days about the musicians on the scene, named Corcoran Holt, fantastic young bass player.
Sure.
So that's kind of what's coming up in the next 4 weeks or so.
Will we be able to hear from you? You've done it in the past. Another solo recording from you. I really enjoy those solo recordings almost as much as the trio recordings. Not quite, but almost as much
Well, I'll
as the
tell you
trio
this, it's on
recording.
my mind uh, because this four CD project is big. I'm doing a lot of it myself. I'm the chief cook and bottle washer in a lot of ways, but yeah, what's on my mind next is solo and duo.
Hmm.
And duo, not, there used to be, as I know you are aware, a big piano and bass duo scene in New York City. You could go to Bradley's, the Knickerbocker, you'd see all the top people. And that may be part of it, but I'm thinking more duets with a sax player, duets with a vocalist, duets that it's almost like it's very like a dialogue, like chamber music in a way. And my duet album with Bob Brookmeyer is one of the things that I'm most proud of. So those are the two things I'm hoping to record next: is
I have to
some
ask you
solo and some duo.
because you grew up in New York City. I'm sure you were at Bradley's numerous times. Tell me about a particular night you were there that was really special.
Huh. Well, uh, boy, there were a lot, and it was a long time ago. You know what's coming to mind as we're talking about it actually is the other place, the Knickerbocker,
Mhm.
across the street, and because the students can't believe when I describe the scene, which is you've got Cedar Walton at the piano, their eyes light up. You've got Ron Carter at the bass, who's still with us, but a legend, of course, and they're playing in like a steakhouse. And there's a little crowd of people right behind them that's hanging on every note, and maybe a couple tables in front. But behind that are people who are having dinner and have no idea that they've got the cream of the crop of jazz, not just New York jazz, jazz period, playing for them. So that was a time in New York that when I tell students about it, it almost doesn't make sense to them that this could be possible.
And you haven't even mentioned the cats that were hanging out at the bar. It could be
Yeah,
Tommy Flanagan
yeah,
and
right.
George Cables and Harold
Yeah, George
Mayburn and
Raz.
so many others. And speaking of,
Woman.
the class acts, tell me something, because I know you're one of the lucky ones that actually got to study with Lenny Tristano. Talk about something that Lenny imparted to you.
Well, again, what I mentioned about Jackie Byard, and knowing some things but not knowing a full picture. It was even more so with Lenny Tristano, because the truth is, I got to know and love and be heavily influenced by Lenny Tristano about 10 years after I studied with him, because I was, again, a 15-year-old kid, and he just had his method, sing along with Charlie Parker solos. So I would sing along with Just Friends or something. And he would say, well, that was pretty good, but you didn't quite get it. Bring it again next week. And that was, you know, there, there wasn't that much pedagogical information past things like that. So, and then all of a sudden, when I discovered Lenny Tristano in my mid 20s, partially because I received a grant to do music of what was called lesser known jazz pianist composers, and I put Lenny on the list. And all of a sudden I went, oh my God, this guy is unbelievable of the myriad of things that I wish I could now talk to him about. But basically, we were working on bebop at the time.
No, I can think of it's a pretty good person to work on bebop with, Lenny
Yeah.
Tristano. Ted Rosenthal, the first of four acts in a trio setting, is called High Standards. It features two of his trio, and to execute the high standard that he does every time he sits down at the piano has to do with the sense memory that he's encountered through the course in his creative life. Thank you, sir, for sharing just a little bit of it with us here today on WBGO. I appreciate that.
My pleasure, Gary. Great to see you and speak together.
You too, man. Got to see you in person one of these days.
I hope so. Thank you.